is where we're going to be at. I don't even think I need to teach tonight with Karen being baptized and Jim walking up here and giving a prayer. It's been a good night already, so I'm done. And Jim Clark's here, of course. That just makes every night worth it. All right, so we are in Matthew 20. What was the big question that the disciples asked back in Matthew 19 that's kind of got Jesus on this teaching path? What was the question that they asked? Who's what? Who's greatest, right? And we're going to see that come up here in this chapter. But as we've seen in Matthew 18 all the way through, Jesus has been giving these lessons throughout, and it's all pretty much been based around this question that the apostles have had of who is greatest or who is going to be the greatest in your kingdom. Okay? Now, question, do the apostles have the right answer in their minds? Of course, right? Yeah, they know who's going to be the greatest. Why? Because we know who the greatest in all the kingdoms are, correct? It's whoever's with the king, and he's going to bless them and take care of them, and they're going to rule and all these great things, right? But what has Jesus been teaching them? Is that the case? No, right? And in Matthew 20, what parable does Jesus give at the very beginning of Matthew 20? The parable of the what? Of the laborers. Can somebody explain that parable for us that we talked about on Sunday? What's that parable like? And they all got paid the same, right? And what did the first workers say to the master? Yeah, it's not fair, right? What do kids say all the time to their parents, right? It's not fair. You know, they've been doing it all day, and these guys just show up at the last hour? And the king's answer is, it's my grace to give, and I decide who I want to give it to, and if I want to be abundant with my grace, then I'm going to be abundant with my grace. Yes, Jim. And they agreed, yes. Yeah, exactly, right? They agreed to it, so, you know, I'm giving you what I owe you, right? Exactly. Okay, and if you look at Matthew 20 and verse 16, Jesus says this. He says, so the last will be first, and the first will be last, or first last, depending on your translation there. And that's going to be what Jesus is going to continue to teach the disciples and the apostles here in this next section of verses. So let's go ahead. If somebody wants to read Matthew chapter 20 and read verses 17 through 19 for us. All right, thank you very much. Okay, kind of get one of those little, this is where they're at type of sections here. Jesus, if you remember all the way back in Matthew 15 and 16, he starts all the way about as far north in Israel as you can get. And he's been working his way down to go to where? Jerusalem, right? And now he's on kind of like that last leg here of that trip. And we're going to see later in the chapter exactly where they're at. So they're going up to Jerusalem. And Jesus takes the 12 aside privately, and what does he tell them? I'm about to die, right? Is this the first time they've heard this from Jesus? No, if you're looking at the screen, right, you know exactly. It's the third time he's told them, at least in Matthew, right? According to Matthew, this is the third time he's told them. The other two times were in Matthew 16. We just see that Jesus tells them about it. We don't actually get direct quotes. And then Matthew 17, we see he tells them again, but he tells them that, hey, I'm going to be betrayed. In that section in Matthew 17. What do you see here? What kind of differences do you notice between those two passages and then here in Matthew 20? He gets a little bit more detailed, at least, right, from what we know, again. Yeah, I'm going to be mocked. I'm going to be flogged. I'm going to be crucified, right? So this isn't just I'm going to die. He's kind of starting now to describe his actual death and what's going to happen around that death. What type of people do you notice are in this passage? Jews and Gentiles. Isn't that interesting? Right? This isn't just, hey, I'm going to Jerusalem where the scribes and the Pharisees and the priests are, but he's telling them the Gentiles are going to have a hand in this too. So, question. The Romans, the Gentiles, right? Non-Jewish people. So, who is responsible for Jesus' death then here, according to Matthew 20? Right? That's always the big question, isn't it? Even today. Who's really responsible for Jesus' death? What does Jesus say? Everybody, right? Everybody's responsible. What does he say the scribes and the chief priests are going to do in verse 18? They're going to condemn him to death, right? And then who are going to be the ones who carry it out? The Gentiles, right? The Romans, the Roman government. They're going to be the ones who carry out. The Jews are going to be the one who condemn him, right? In other words, everybody's going to have a hand in this, okay? What other things do you notice here in these few verses? What kind of things pop out to you? And this, yeah, right, he emphasizes kind of more of a who and how and things like that. Yes, definitely. And again, if you notice, how does he end this section? I'm going to be raised, right? And as we saw in Matthew 17, what kind of things do the apostles usually focus on when they get this speech from Jesus? Do they usually focus on that part? No, right? It's usually everything else he's mentioned. Then he says, hey, I'm going to be raised. And they kind of, for some reason, forget that like we all do, yes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. I am the Son of Man. I am the one who's been prophesied about, right? They're not just killing me because, oh, they want to kill me. They're killing me because it's been prophesied about. Yes, Derek. Yeah, right. Being beaten, mocked, flogged, all that is criminal punishment. Yeah, it's not just, oh, you're innocent, we're going to just kill you. Yeah, it's criminality to it. Awesome. Yep. Yeah, exactly, right? You'll see that when we actually get there, right? You're going to see when Pilate says, what do you want to do? And they say, well, we can't do it, right? It's against the law for us to do it, so you're going to have to do this, yes. Yeah, and if you look at it, though, is that any different than what we do today, right? Right? If we want something done, we usually try to get somebody else to do it for us, right? Exactly. Okay, let's go ahead and keep moving here. In Matthew 20, if somebody wants to read Matthew 20, verse 20 through 28. There we go. Awesome. Thank you very much, Scott. Okay. So they've been having this debate, right, for a few chapters now, for a few weeks. And the question has always been, right, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? And I love this section, right? It's one of those you're like, I wonder how this actually went. Who shows up in verse 20? Mom. Mom shows up. Whose mom? Zebedee's sons. Who are Zebedee's sons of the 12? James and John, all right? You got two of the 12 apostles here when they're having this debate. And I think it's interesting, too. It's like Jesus is telling them, this is what's going to happen. We're kind of on this last leg here. This is what's going to happen. And what are the apostles still thinking about? Who's going to be the greatest, right? It's almost like it's just, just right over their head of what's actually going on here. And I think a lot of times we look at this passage and we think, right, like, oh my goodness, here comes mom, right? I'm going to settle it. But at least to me, when I get this, she goes up, but who's with her? James and John, right? This isn't just mom going on her kid's behalf. It almost seems like, at least to me, and you may look at it a little differently, like James and John know something about their mom. Maybe she's quite persuasive. Maybe she's just going to go mama bear on Jesus, But it's like they're like, hey, mom, can you go, we're having this debate. Can you go talk to him? Right? Maybe he'll listen to you. And when she approaches him, what does she do first? Can you do something for me? But what's the first thing? She does something, though. In verse 20, she kneels. Right? She kneels. She is pretty much begging Jesus, right? Realizing who he is, the authority he has. And what's Jesus say? What do you want? Right? Jesus knows what she's going to say. And what's her question? What's her request? Promise, right? Not just, hey, can you do this for me? Can you think about this when you come into your kingdom? Promise me. Sons, when your mom says, promise me something, what does that make you do, feel? If your mom looked at you and said, promise me something. Like you were commanded, right? Exactly. Like she's saying, Jesus says, what can I do for you? And it's not, if you will it, if you do, it's promise me you're going to do this for my boys. And what does she want? One on the right and one on the left, right? Or right and left, depending on how you're looking at me. What is she asking for? The power and authority for her sons? What else? Yeah, exactly, right? She's thinking, and her sons are thinking as well, right? This isn't just mom. Again, the boys are right there with her, like, get him, mom, And she's asking, make them the most prominent men in your kingdom. That's what she's asking for. Right? Can you do this for me, Jesus? Can you promise me that you'll do this when you come into your kingdom? And what's Jesus' response? I love his response. It's twofold. What's the first thing he says? You don't understand what you're asking me, right? How often do we do that? Do we ask Jesus, do we ask God something? And we're like, I know this is what I want. Because James and John, I'm telling you, they're like, we're going to do this. We're going to get my whole family's going to get involved in this. We're going to be on the left and the right. He can't say no. This is a great idea. And Jesus is going, you don't know what you're asking. Yeah, we're going to get to that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. Yep. But it's interesting, though, right, do we ever do that today? Do we ever look at God, look at Jesus and say, God, I know this is what I want. This is what I need. And how many times do we fail to realize that maybe Jesus is looking at us going, you don't know what you're asking for? Adam, do you have a comment? Yeah, exactly, right. And I'll pay you later for that comment, by the way. But, right, we do that, don't we, though, huh? We all sit there and we go, Jesus, I know this is what I want. This is what I need. And Jesus and God go, no, right? You don't know what you ask. And then he says, what's the question he asks? Are you able to drink the cup that I am about to drink? What does that take your mind to? Where else in the scripture does that take your mind to when Jesus is talking about drinking a cup? The Lord's Supper, where else? Gethsemane, right? What's he praying 3 times? Let this cup pass from me, right? Like, please just don't let me go through this, but if I have to, I will. And that's what Jesus is saying here, saying, do you fully understand what I'm about to go through? Right? And they don't. Like Adam said, right? They're thinking, at the very least, we're going to go to Jerusalem. He's going to just go in there. This is it, man. I know this is it. We are ready. We've been doing this now for about 3 years. We're at the peak of our popularity. Jesus is going to go in there and start getting some stuff done. So yeah, we need to position ourselves where we're going to be in this great spot. Yeah, he's going to be taking names, and we need to remind him, right? Remember, what was Peter's question back in chapter 19? We left everything and followed you. What are we going to get, right? And that's James and John's question here is, Peter's asking this question, what he's going to get? Well, we better get in there too and remind him, hey, we've been here also, Jesus. Right? We were up on that mount with you as well. Yeah. We should be in the inner circle, yeah, right? This isn't, they're not, this isn't Matthew, right? This isn't Thaddeus, the one, no, this is James and John. They're right there. They're one of the 3 that are always around Jesus, right? And that's probably why they send their mom. I'm sure their mom knows Jesus very well, which is why she's comfortable asking this question for her boys, right? And then, so Jesus tells them, are you able to drink it? And what's their answer? I love their answer. Oh, yeah. Of course, Jesus, I can do that, right? I think it's funny. We always get on to Peter, right? Because Peter's always the one who opens up his mouth and then kind of looks, and you're just like, Peter, don't do it. But here's James and John, and what's their response? Can you handle it? Yep. We got it. And again, it's this idea of we always think we know we can handle it, right? No matter what. Jesus is literally telling them, I'm going to suffer. Are you going to be able to suffer with me? And their response is, yep. How many of us, honestly, if we were told, hey, you're going to suffer, are going to sign up and be like, yeah, let me suffer, right? Let's do this. I want to suffer. I'd be looking for the door. Exactly, right? I'd be like, hey, I'm going to suffer. You want to come with me? Nope. Right? Yes, Tyler. Yeah. Yeah, exactly right. And you see here in verse 23, what's the answer once they say, yes, we can? What's he tell them? He said, oh, yeah, you will, right? You're going to, James and John. Don't you worry about it, right? And he says, but to sit at my right and my left, it's not mine to give. Whose is it to give? It's God. It's the Father, right? It's going back again to the beginning of chapter 20, isn't it? And again, remember, this isn't breaks here. This is really going back all the way to chapter 16 and 17 and 18 and onwards. But if you look at the beginning of the chapter, what was the whole point of the parable of the vineyard? Who got to give the grace? The Father, right? The Master. He got to give the grace to the laborers. And that's what Jesus is telling them again here. Remember that story I literally just told you guys? It's not mine to give. You're going to suffer, though. And so my question, right, is really, they're not asking, hey, Jesus, you're going to Jerusalem. What can I do for you? What are they asking? What can you do for me? Right? And I wonder how often do we as Christians look at God and look at Jesus and say, hey, what can you do for me? Right? Yes, Levi. Right. Yeah, exactly, right? It's, hey, I've done all this. What are you going to give me, right? I've earned it. I've worked for it, right? And again, in grace, do you earn grace? No, you don't earn grace, because once you earn it, what's it not anymore? It's not grace anymore, right? And whether it's a little bit of grace, right? Oh, I was the last laborer in, or I was James and John. I was one of the first ones there. You don't earn it. You just get it because the Father, the King, wants to give it to you. Yes, did you ever? Yep. Yep. Yeah, exactly, right? And I think also when you look at this, right, and I look at this scripture of, we look at them and we're like, how do they not get it, right? How do they not understand that it's not a physical kingdom? How do they not understand that Jesus is talking spiritually here? How do we oftentimes look at God and Jesus? How often are our prayers about, hey, God, can you do this for me here? Can you do this for me now? And not about, hey, God, what can I do for you? Show me what I can do for you, right? Show me what I need to do spiritually in your kingdom. Kind of going with Tyler's lesson tonight, right? Like, we got to get out and work, right? It's not just what can I do, right? Because, man, I got to get some more numbers in this building, right? We got to get some butts in these seats, right? We need to get up to like 200, 250 people. Once we have 300 people, then we know God loves us, right? And that's how the disciples were thinking of, let's get this physical kingdom going. And how often are we thinking, let's get this physical kingdom going, right? When it's really, what are you doing for God now? How do, verse 24, how do the other 10 respond? They didn't much care for it. If you have the CSB version, it says they become indignant with the two brothers. Does anybody else have any other words there? Displeased, right? Kind of jealous, mad. We look at these things on the outside and we go, that's just ridiculous, right? The other 10 are now getting jealous because, they're all thinking the same thing and they beat them to the punch, right? And again, though, how often do we see somebody in the church doing something great for God and we all get jealous of it? We go, man, that should be me up there doing that. Why is he up there leading singing? He doesn't have that good of a voice, right? Yeah, with the mother, right? That's probably mom power right there. They know to stay away from that, right? But again, though, right, they're afraid of her, right? Again, though, we all want, a part of us, right, a lot of times want the spotlight. I want to be the one that everybody looks at and says, wow, that was a great lesson. Wow, that was a great prayer. That was a great this. I've heard you're doing these Bible studies. Good job with these people. I heard you've been studying with this person. That person got baptized. Whoop, mark one up in your book in the kingdom. And we all get jealous of it. What should we be doing for people like that? Trying to work with them, trying to encourage them, right? Be a Barnabas, right? What was Barnabas literally, why was he called Barnabas? Son of encouragement. One of the people that most people can name in the Bible, Barnabas, his whole gift was to encourage other people to go out and do things. That is a great thing to do. And when we get our minds off of the physical idea of the kingdom, it becomes a lot easier not to be jealous of other people, isn't it? Not yet, no. He has not washed them yet. Yeah, not yet. Yeah, hopping mad, right? There you go. That's a Southern term we can all understand, huh? Right? He was hopping mad. Yes, sir. Yep. Thank you for that, Jim. I appreciate it. And again, right, and what does Jesus tell all of them this time? Kind of rebukes them a little bit. He's saying, how are you thinking? You're thinking like the what? The Gentile. Ooh. Right? You're telling 12 Jewish men who have been following you now for 3 years, you're thinking like the rulers of the Gentiles. Right? In other words, what Jesus is telling them is, knock it off, right? Enough of this. We've been dealing with this for really ever since y'all started following me. You've been asking this question, and I'm tired of it. Right? Have you ever gotten that way with your kids? Where they just keep bugging you about the same thing? It's like a week later, and they come back and ask you again, hey, Dad, remember that thing I was talking to you about the other day, right? And you're like, I already answered you. Knock it off. That's kind of how Jesus is getting now with him. He's like, we don't have much time left. We're on the road. We got a lot more things to do. I got a lot more things I got to teach you. You all need to just stop thinking like the Gentiles and their rulers. And then he tells them, how's the kingdom going to be? At the very end there. What's he say? What's the Son of Man going to do? In verse 27, he says, if you want to be first, what do you got to be? A servant, a slave. You got to be last. And then he says, what's the Son of Man doing? He didn't come to be served, but to what? To serve by giving his life as a ransom, right? I'm going to give, you want to see service? I'm going to show you service. And when he tells them, are you able to drink the cup? He's now telling them, I'm going to show you how to drink the cup and what that's going to mean, right? It's going to mean pain. It's going to mean agony. It's going to mean death. It's going to mean separation from the Father, right? Are you able to do that for me? And that's the point he's trying to get across to his disciples here. Any thoughts, random comments about this section before we jump into the last one? Adam. Hopefully we do, right? Because we always see it so much clearer than everybody else does, especially the apostles. Thank you. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this last section here. If somebody wants to read, yes, Steve.
There's got to be some significance in verse 27 when he says, the first of you must be your slave.
And they do it, right, because what's the request from their master? Right? This is what I want you to do, right? You're not going to earn anything by it, right? You're doing it because I am the master. This is the example I've set for you. This is what I've commanded you to do, yeah.
It's that same word when it talks about when the servant comes in
Mm-hmm.
after having worked all day, and then he has to go fix the master something to eat. And he doesn't get to eat right then because he's the servant.
Servant.
He has to wait till
Yeah.
the master does it.
Yeah, exactly, yes.
There's some significance to that sometimes we want to gloss over.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, well, I think I'm going to do this for God. Well, no, this is what you're made for.
Yeah, this is what you are, right? And this is what he's been teaching his disciples and apostles the whole time, right? Is the harvest plenty, and I need workers. And you're going to be workers for me, right? Because, again, it's not I earned it. It's because of the grace that was been given to you. Thank you. All right, if somebody wants to read Matthew 20, verses 29 through 34 here. All right, thank you very much, Tyra. Okay, if you see here, I titled this little section, right? The blind see again, right? This is the third time we've seen in Matthew where Jesus is healing somebody blind, right? And there's got to be a point to that we'll get to. First thing I want us to notice is where are they leaving from? Jericho. Okay, so they are going from Jericho, and I'm showing you this map here for a reason. You're going to find this account in Mark as well, and then also in Luke. And when you read this section, you're going to get to Luke, and you're going to be like, wait a second, something's not right here, and we'll explain it in just a second. All right, so if you can see this map here, all the way over here on the right is what they call Jericho Residential, okay? That is Old Testament Jericho, okay? That is where the walls were, where Joshua conquered, where the Israelites set up in the Old Testament is right there. As you're going towards Jerusalem, you're going to hit about 1.5 miles down the road what's called Jericho Municipal, okay? That was what was built by Alexander the Great and the Herodians a couple hundred years before Jesus, right? It's kind of the Greek portion of Jericho. And then you start to go up. That's actually about 800 feet below sea level, okay, is Jericho. And you start to go up. It's about 14 miles if you're going straight across to Jerusalem, but you don't get to go straight across to Jerusalem. You get to go up to Jerusalem because you're going up about 3,300 feet, okay? A lot of people hike this a lot of the time, and it usually takes most people about 8 to 9 hours, right? So you might be going, why in the world do I want to know this? Here's another view of it. Up there in the north, you can see residential Jericho. Down below is municipal Jericho. The reason why I bring this up is because in Mark and in Matthew, what does it say? It says, as they were what? Leaving Jericho, as they were going out from Jericho. But then Luke says, as they're going into Jericho. So which is it? Are they leaving or are they going in? Yes, right? Yes, right? Matthew and Mark are telling the story from the Jewish perspective, so the Jewish people are going to be like, yeah, Jericho, that's the part where the walls were and everything. Luke is writing from what perspective? The Gentile, the Greek perspective. So the Greeks are going to go, oh yeah, I know Jericho, right? It's right down there. So where this takes place is kind of in between is what most scholars believe, right? They're leaving and they're going into Jericho, okay? So if anybody ever looks at you and says, there's a contradiction in the Bible, no, there isn't, okay? Just Google this map and you'll find it. It's real easy. So they're doing this, and what happens as they're walking around? Who's crying out to them? 2 blind men, right? We know one of their names is Bartimaeus. We get that in Mark. And what are they saying? Have mercy on us, Son of David. Have we heard that before? Who else has said, have mercy on me, Son of David? Some other Gentile, right? A Canaanite woman, right, said, Son of David, have mercy on me. Again, isn't it interesting, right? A Canaanite woman, blind men. What do they know about Jesus? What do they know about him? He's the king. He's the son of David. He's higher than me, right? And again, the reason why I believe Matthew puts in 3 different examples, specific examples of Jesus healing the blind, is to show, right, those who are physically blind, what do they see? That Jesus is the king, right? They see Jesus for who he is. And then the people who should see, what do they see Jesus as? A rebel, of this, of that, right? Again, if you go back to Matthew 15, what does Jesus say about the Pharisees? They're blind guides that'll lead you into a pit, right? And that's why Matthew, again, is, because you're looking at it and you're going, oh yeah, Jesus is healing a blind person again. Right? Matthew's not putting that in there to just say, hey, look, here's another miracle of healing the blind. That's a cool one. Let's put that in there again. He's trying to make a point. And it's this point Jesus has been trying to make, and the Holy Spirit's been trying to make through Matthew this whole time, of those who should see Jesus, who physically can see Jesus, spiritually over their heart have no idea who he is, refuse to see him for he is. And then those who physically can't see, in their hearts and in their souls, know exactly who he is. Yes, Derek and then Steve. Yeah, no, it is very good parallels, right? And also I think, too, is if you look in verse 34, they say, Jesus says, what do you want? They say, Lord, open our eyes. And what in verse 34 does your verse start with? With compassion, with pity, right? Have we seen that before? Yeah. Jesus is feeding the 5,000. What does it say? He had compassion on them. Right? Jesus isn't just going around doing this because, I got to do it, I'm Jesus. It's because he has compassion on his people. Yes. All right. Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. And we'll pick up on Sunday.